not here right now, no. But if you need to talk to someone regarding grants, I can let you talk to Miss Thomas. Mrs. Thomas. Yeah, no, she's not in the room. Um, yeah, sounds, we have a council member named Pugh, and she's Pugh Pope, kind of like that. Yeah. Mattia, yeah, that's Mattia, yeah. Yeah, yeah, you got the right person. Yeah, yeah, she's not here right now. Yeah.
Test.
Good evening, good afternoon. It is June 13th. It is 3:32. We're a few minutes late, but let's call the Community Impact Grants Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Branham, Livingston, Barron,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
English.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And please, I guess for the record, let me state that Councilmember Branham did reach out ahead of time to let me know that he is traveling and would not be able to attend. I think he was going to try it, depending on his flight, but he did send notification. And then Councilmember Livingston as well is traveling and may be able to be here in time, but he's running. So the first item on the agenda is number 2, adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes from staff?
No recommended changes.
I'll entertain a
Move to approve. Second.
motion in a second. Madam Clerk?
Barron,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge Councilmember Derek Pugh from the mighty District 2. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Next item is item number 3, 3A, recommended use for our $400,000 of ARPA funds. Just to kind of open this up as we move into this item of discussion, our last committee meeting, we reviewed our application for community impact grants as well as guidelines for that application. And this committee gave recommendations that were ultimately accepted by this committee and sent on to our full council for approval. That was shared with council and they voted on it. Since then, the council did have a budget meeting, and during that time period, there was a motion to send $400,000 of ARPA funds to the Community Impact Grant Committee to include in our grant process and award to community partners, local nonprofits in our community. And so because of that and the timing which we received it, this committee needed to meet again to discuss how we would incorporate this additional $400,000 into the current application and guideline package that we have already developed. And so that is kind of where we are right now, and this kind of highlights this item for discussion. I will open it up right now for I know Ms. Barron serves as chair of the COVID committee. If there's any additional information you wanted to provide as relates to the $400,000 before we open this up for discussion with the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. So with that, the committee, when we were having discussion, it was one of the things that we had discussion about the nonprofit organizations who had been placed in the general fund budget. There were motions that were made. I know I made motions. Ms. McBride made some motions, and perhaps some other council members had made motions. But staying true to the process that we have put in place, and that nonprofits would come through this committee. In our discussion, Ms. Newton, which I see on online here, we did have lots of conversation about how we can look to support some of those nonprofits that were not, they're not one of our community partners, or council members had intended for them to be able to be funded through the traditional grant, through the traditional budget process. And so this is the compromise that we came up with after a quite lengthy discussion, and that is that $400,000 would come back to this committee. And if I may, Ms. Mackey, may I make my comments on the?
Sure.
And so with that, just giving a little further thought and detail to it, I personally would like to see that that these funds be a part of our application process that we've already gone through and been approved from full council. However, I think it would be worthy of either having a separate application that is identical to the one we already have, just denoting that they would be applying for ARPA funds, or adding a box to the existing one that we have, and then give applicants the choice to apply, and they could apply for the community impact funds that are up to $50,000, or perhaps they could apply for ARPA funds, which is this $400,000. It's a recommendation, when I look at the organizations that had submitted what we had motions for, most of them averaged around the $100,000 mark. So I'd like to be able to see specifically those organizations be able to apply, not noting that this is typical process. No one skates the competitive side of things, but to set aside these funds up to $100,000 that the nonprofits can apply for, indicating ARPA funds, meeting all the guidelines that ARPA funds have to adhere to, but just using the existing process that we have in place through the Community Impact Grants Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Also want to recognize Councilwoman Teresia. Thank you for joining us. And I briefly saw Councilwoman Newton online, but I think we lost her. But she was, oh, there she is. Thank you, Councilwoman Newton, for joining us today. All right, Councilwoman Pugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a great idea of what Ms. Barron has proposed to the body. And I also want to echo the same sentiments as our other council member that's not here, Ms. McBride, who has a concern with those smaller groups not being able to compete for the grants because, one, they may not have the skill set to be able to apply for those grants, which will kind of X them out. And this is just a question. Is it a conflict of interest for our Office of Small Business to help with those who may be having problems filling out those applications, so at least they'll be able to have some type of fight in the competitive process of receiving some of the grant money? I guess that's a question for the attorney.
I don't know if it's a conflict of interest. I guess if the administration thinks that's the proper department to do that, then that would be fine.
Yes, sir, Ms. Pugh.
I think what I'm trying to say is that the competitive process definitely creates transparency, and it gives us more of a transparent look on the outside of us making sure that we're being responsible with taxpayers' money. But at the same time, we don't want our competitive process to X out those people that are in the community actually on the ground doing the work because they're not capable of completing the process or completing the application that meets the guidelines. And so when I thought about the Office of Small Business, I know we help people with business plans. I know we help people with all types of other things when it comes to specific business ventures and things that they need. And I was just tossing it out there to see if that would be something that we could offer to those smaller groups that are actually out pounding the pavement that could actually use these grant processes. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I guess I will say, as far as it kind of help with application, I know in the past we've had a member of our grants department help with that, and I would assume that they could still be available to do that. I'm not sure that OSBO helped with applications in the past, but correct me if I'm wrong. No? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe they took phone calls or gave general information when we were doing the application related to the COVID funds associated with American
for small- but that was
for the
specific
emergency
for
rental
small
assistance or something like that.
business. Okay.
I would just say Mr. Pugh and to the attorneys, because he did mention if the administration thought it was okay. In general, I don't have an issue. I certainly would not want any member to feel as though I took their advice, they sent me down the wrong path, and I didn't get it. That would be my concern for the Office of Small Business, not as the administrator, but just for someone who felt like maybe they didn't get the help that they would have otherwise gotten because they were led by the county down the wrong path.
Yes, sir.
And I don't specifically mean the Office of Small Business itself, but whatever department could assist. That's what I'm asking. And I just use the Office of Small Business because I know that they do workshops and other things to help small businesses in the community. So it doesn't specifically have to be the Office of Small Business. I'm just asking for help for the small
Understood.
business. That's all.
And I want to make sure we all saying the same thing. So just be clear. So as far as our grant application, they do have to be a nonprofit. So that is, I think, too, a key difference between businesses getting money versus a nonprofit. So you do need to be a nonprofit. But I think we can figure out ways, if folks need help, how we can go about doing it. I think the committee has done a good job with the application of trying to streamline it and make it, let's say, simpler in the sense of information they have to provide, but making sure we also get enough to where we as a body are making a fair decision, that everyone's providing the same information and that, but we're not making folks go above and beyond, because we also understand this grant application is not necessarily giving away, $1 million, but $50,000 is still a lot of money, and it is taxpayers' dollars. And so we also want to make sure as a body that we have the appropriate information from all potential applicants to explain where the money went and how they're using it. So I do think the application asks enough questions without being overbearing and a lot of work. But I definitely think we can work with staff and maybe our grants department to figure out ways to provide assistance if needed. Ms. Aaron.
So I just wanted to offer up a couple things and remind the committee that we did state in our previous meetings that we would have technical assistance workshops so that any applicant that would apply would have an audience with our staff to go over the application. So that's one way that we will be able to assist the general public. And the other thing that I think is worthy of offering up at this moment is that the application that the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee put forth when we did the $16 million, that was a very detailed application. This process is going to be a lot simpler for the applicants who are going to come through. And that's one of the reasons as we look at the process that we went through with the $16 million, there were some things that we did really well, and there's some things that we could improve on as well. And so as we look at how we can improve, I think this offers another opportunity for some of those organizations, because we had a large number of applicants, and some of them, a good many of them they didn't qualify. It didn't mean that they didn't need the funds, but they didn't qualify. So this provides them another opportunity, now having gone through a very rigid process, to now they can take that same information and dump it, if you allow me to say, dump it over into Zoom grants in a very simplistic form, noting that all the guidelines, and I really want us to remember this, that there are two different guidelines for community impact grants versus the ARPA funds, and they still have to adhere to those guidelines, and they still, even to apply. And I think that's the piece that, as we communicate as a body and as an organization, that is clearly stated, if you apply for these funds, for the ARPA funds specifically, there are guidelines. And I'm hoping that as we look at technical assistance workshops in helping all nonprofits who need the help to apply, that we really lift that information up so that it doesn't get lost in the sauce, because I could see where it could be. So we really have to separate the two processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. I know Ms. Newton had a comment, I believe. And then I want to, is she there? I also want to get staff. No?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I apologize if my comments seem a little bit out of place. I did have some technical difficulties where I couldn't hear, and then I had to disconnect and reconnect. So thank you for allowing me to participate. I guess from my perspective, I would have a few thoughts which may be slightly different from some of my colleagues. So I guess two things. Number one is I would be remiss if I didn't point out that it was up to $400,000 in funding. So, you know, it's not a requirement, but it is up to. But as we look at things, I guess I would like to see things be as standard as possible. I think that the committee has done really great work in terms of saying, you know, this is a fair process for the community. These are what the guidelines are, and this is what we want to do. And so I, for me, would love to see these additional dollars that are being put in mirror that process. And I say that from a few different angles. Number one, if the regular pot is $50,000, I think this pot should be $50,000. I think it never occurred to me it would be different when the committee forwarded these dollars here. I think it's weird for some to say, you're doing yeoman's work in the community, but you can have this much, and you're doing yeoman's work, but using the same process, you get something different. Certainly agree with having to note if people are applying for ARPA or not applying for ARPA, but I guess I would more want to look at, are they ARPA eligible or not, and have that be a decision that the council makes. And if they don't want our ARPA funds, they have the right to say no. But, you know, having it be like, we're only applying for this, and then we have to do that if we don't think that that's the best choice for the county dollars, makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And I guess I'm unclear on what people are saying about competitiveness, but I guess I feel like the committee set up this process. There's an application process, and it should be the same for everybody, and that it was designed specifically to be fair. And so, again, maybe I misunderstood, or there was clarification that was happening when I was not able to be part of the meeting. But if we have a process that the Community Impact Grant Committee has followed, I think that that's the same process that should be followed in terms of the amount, in terms of the competitiveness, et cetera, where the only exception is where there might be some additional requirements imposed because of federal guidelines for ARPA. So again, thanks for hearing me. Sorry if I missed some key data when I was not connected.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. I guess just to be clear, at this point, the application that the body has approved is an application that everyone would fill out to receive community impact grant funds. So everyone is following the same process and will have to be reviewed by committee members and then recommended to council for approval. So everyone is following the same application process. Everyone has to submit the same information. So there is fair treatment, I believe, in across the board for the current process that we have, and that, you know, everybody, there's no special treatment per se. With the addition now of the ARPA funds that we received, I think you, just for clarification and your comments, are you saying that you would prefer everyone to fill out an application and answer ARPA-related questions? Because in our packet, staff has provided recommendations of additional material and information that is needed to meet ARPA guidelines. And so are you stating that you would like to see everyone fill out the additional ARPA questions regardless? Is that?
So that's what I was suggesting, but I'm happy to back away from that. I guess my real point at the bottom of all of that is that we have funds, and I just feel like the discretion to say, nonprofit A, you meet all the requirements for ARPA, you're going to get ARPA funds, and nonprofit B, you don't meet the requirements for ARPA, but you're doing great work, so you're going to get these general fund dollars. I feel like that should be at the discretion of council. I guess I would feel weird. So maybe they do all have to fill it out. But if we're in a situation where council wants to give somebody ARPA dollars and they're like, no, I don't want your ARPA dollars, I only want general fund dollars, then I think that council should have at its discretion to decide, well, sorry, these are the dollars that we have to offer based on, you know, the multitude of applications that you're going to be looking at. Because what we're trying to figure out is how we can fund the maximum number of organizations. Does that answer your question? So I came around to say, yeah, probably, unless we think it's really intrusive. Or there's some sort of two-step process where we look at things and we reserve the right to come back and ask those questions.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question. All right, at this point, if no one else has any major things, I would like to turn over to staff just really quickly to talk about the additional guidelines that were placed in our packet. Looking at pages 2 to 14, you have the application that the committee has already reviewed and agreed upon, as well as council. And then you have additional guidelines as well. And then you see there are additional pages that have been added that would reflect the needs of information required to meet ARPA guidelines. I don't know, Mr. Brown or ACA Thomas, not sure who wants to address this, but if you could just give us a little brief overview of, I guess, your recommendation as to how this additional information added to the application would be able to help us meet the requirements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in your packet, knowing that the application had already been approved and we were trying to remain with the application being as simplistic as possible, in speaking with Guidehouse, their recommendation was for us to ask for additional information in the guidelines of the process. I will point out those areas where we've added language to address the fact that we have two pots of funds. So we can't commingle funds. But we can't commingle funds, but we can fund for specific items within it, as long as we don't just mix it all together and say, you got the strawberry milkshake now, not the ice cream and the milk or in the strawberries. So if you'll go to page 3 in your packet, at the bottom, under the program will not fund, the recommendation there was to add a disclosure that says that we may, in whole or in part, fund their projects with SLFRF funding. This lets them know that that there is the possibility that these may not all be general fund dollars. Okay. And I apologize, I have to toggle between a couple of different screens here to get to my red line version. In the next section, grant application, under geographic information, we have added, please note census tracts if possible. Those are good guidelines for staff because they help us to identify projects immediately. Not required, but if possible. Under project description, we've added where as specifically as possible, including characteristics of the community or individuals that will directly benefit from the project. Under benefit to the community, we've added, please be as specific as possible about target population.
Hold on, repeat that one again. Under which one?
Under project benefit to the community, we've added, please be as specific as possible about target population.
Oh, okay, I see it. Thank you.
There were no other changes there. What you see in the last pages of your packet actually are documents that would help staff to walk through the applications to determine who would have projects and activities that would be eligible for the $400,000. If you decided to go in a different direction with another application, we would have to sort of go back again and determine what we might want to do a little bit differently. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Barron,
Yes.
recognized.
ACA Thomas, so with this application packet that you presented to us, everyone, there's just one application.
Yes, ma'am.
There's one application, eliminates my statement of having to check a box or whatnot. We'll be checking boxes as a staff.
Yes, ma'am.
And to be clear, that there could possibly be one applicant could receive money from both pots
For specific activities.
for
yes, ma'am.
specific activities. Could be the same program, but it could support different things.
Yes.
And so my concern, and I want to, and I say this thinking about staff, that seems to be a quite difficult task to do.
Well, because these are still ARPA dollars, we do have the benefit of using our contractor to help us if we need specific application questions or specific questions answered to relative to projects. And while it may be a little more difficult, it's possible also that you may have one or two applicants that may have a project that in totality achieves the entire $400,000, or three. So you may not even have to split projects. I would think that is a likelihood with some of your community partners.
If I may, Jackie.
Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
So is it the intent of this document that, as Ms. Newton stated earlier, that everyone who applied for, who are not community partners, could very well only receive the $50,000? Is this, when you all put this together, that was the understanding?
Yes, ma'am, that was the guidance that we took away from what had happened up until that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the recommended changes to the application regarding ARPA? Councilwoman English, you recognize.
For clarification, if I knowingly don't qualify for ARPA, am I still required to fill that? That's my question.
There's not an actual section in the application that asks ARPA-specific questions. It's a general application where they would describe it. We are asking that they be aware that this is a pot of funding that is available, and for them to give us as much information as possible. In fairness, it does increase the probability of them getting funds if they are eligible.
I guess one of the things, and I just might as well go ahead, if I don't mind.
Oh, go right ahead.
When I'm going through the grant process, and I've been working with grants for years, you all, as people continue to fill out grant applications, it helps them move towards sustainability and the ability to apply for other funds from additional organizations, not necessarily Richland County, but other government funds, other federal funds, and what have you. And the guidelines help to build the needs for the organization. So in other words, they can grow as a result of finding out what they're working on, what worked, what didn't work. One of the things that we find out all the time is those outcomes that weren't planned for. You have increased community involvement, you have better communication, you have social circles that develop, and all these things that build or that help build that cohesiveness for that organization. So I don't want to minimize their abilities, because they will continue to grow as they continue doing this process. And I just felt the need to just share that, even though they may be, socioeconomic deprived, I still feel like they have the ability to grow and move towards excellence. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, let me, Ms. Newton, I can't see this little screen. Okay. All right, Ms. Barron, you recognize?
So I hope it's appropriate, because I take this as a recommendation that staff has brought to us. Clarification, is this a recommendation that you have brought to us?
I think it's more, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's more of a, here's information, we know the committee got $400,000, here's how you can best address the money you received. I don't know if you would say strongly it's a recommendation, would you? Or is this just, here's the information of how you can get done?
I was just say that this is an information on an opportunity that we could move forward with the process.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to attempt. And so I'd like to make a motion to utilize the information presented in our packet as presented by staff, period.
Second.
I was going to say something
I
else.
appreciate all of my colleagues today. Okay, and I just want to get clarification from staff, I'm sorry. Based off that motion, is there anything else that we would need to clarify, I guess at this point, to make the application complete? Do you need additional language with that motion, or is that enough?
As the county attorney is satisfied with it, I certainly am.
Yeah, I think that's enough for them if they understand what to do. Yeah.
And so the reason why I chose to be vague is because the specifics are in the document.
Yes, ma'am. The idea here would be that as long as it's updated with council this evening, then we could move forward with workshops and the entire process for opening the grants on July 1.
And so just for clarification, when we talk about initially the guidelines where we had the up to dollar amount, are we, as a body, are we sticking with $50,000, or is that amount changing? Because that was also brought up, so I want to clarify.
Although I feel very passionate about increasing the amount, I'm afraid by increasing the amount, we could muddy the waters somewhat. And so I would love to see the amount more, because as I previously stated, there were at least 4 organizations that there were motions for that on average needed anywhere from $80,000 to $150,000 for those motions. So, my intent was to increase it, but in a point of negotiation and really pushing this forward without hesitancy, I will refrain from increasing it.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? We have a motion and a second, and we're currently in discussion. Any other comments? Ms. English, you're recognized.
Thank you. Other than to increase the number of partners, I agree with you. There's passion behind that. If they're, again, if they fit in that partners area, I don't see.
And I apologize, can you give me a page onto where that language is specifically so I can make sure I'm on the same page?
The 9 community partners that we've identified.
And so what were you saying? That we want to increase those?
No, if you wanted to add one of those agencies to that
Oh,
list.
okay, got it.
Ms.
Yes, Ms. Barron, you're recognized.
So with that being said, is that appropriate? I know that the 9 went before full council and was voted on. Do we have the authority in this body to add additional community partners in this category and in this process? Would it also have to, as we take this recommendation to full council, would the additional partners have to also be approved again?
Yes, so any changes that we make to this application at this point would have to go back for council. So there's nothing that we can necessarily just make. Everything is going back through council again. And so the piece that we're in now is a discussion just related to the application. So I would stick with that, and then if we need to come
Okay.
back, we can address something else. But this is related to the application and the funding for the 400,000. And so I think we're good. Ms. Barron, I'm sorry, would you just repeat your motion one more time for the record?
I'm on to the next. What are you talking about?
So we're clear.
Okay, I don't know that I will do it verbatim, but I move to accept the staff's, it wasn't a recommendation, to accept the information as presented in our packet by the staff.
Thank you. And so that motion was made by Councilwoman Barron, seconded by Councilman English. We had discussion. Madam Clerk, we'll take the roll for the vote, please.
Barron,
Yes?
Mackey,
Yes,
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
thank you. I do have a question just related, and this might be Attorney or Administrator Brown. With this going tonight, is that possible?
They're in committee. They're listed under committees, yeah.
You want to go and tell her that you're on there? He's looking.
Okay. Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
the committee is listed under the agenda for report, but it doesn't have any attachments to it because the meeting happened today, right? So, but the committee is able to report to full council today.
Okay, thank you. And we don't anticipate that would change any of the timeline at all? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Madam Clerk, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you.
Nope.
I'm sorry, I will have to take back what I said. The report of the committee is not listed on tonight's agenda because this meeting was scheduled after agenda was prepared, so.
So going back to Administrator Brown and Attorney, so what would be our next course of action?
Well, it couldn't be on tonight's agenda because it has to have 24 hours notice to the public.
So, Mr. Brown or the clerk, when is our next scheduled meeting right now at this point where this could go that we could still meet our schedule?
July the 11th.
Got it. So that is not possible at this point. I just, no, it's fine. I had several of my committee members say something that I would love for them to say out loud so no one thinks that I requested this.
I think we should have a special call meeting.
So when I ask y'all to come
Gretchen
here,
Barron.
no one says that I asked you to come here.
Would you like for me to ask, ma'am?
Second.
All right, I will work with the clerk to get a special called meeting. Oh, excuse me, I'll actually work with the chair to get a special called meeting, possibly to address this issue. Okay. All right, any other discussions from the committee? Councilwoman English, you're recognized.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks to Councilwoman Barron. The 4 that were brought before us were Communities in School, the Wiley Kennedy, Midlands Food Bank, and St. John Foundation. And I am reading and I apologize. I'd like for the committee to discuss the possibility of adding those, either some or all.
Right, thank you, Councilwoman English. She's brought up an item for discussion with the body. As a reminder, the committee previously voted on 9 organizations deemed as community partners. The committee sent this recommendation to council, and that was approved. If you look on page 11 of your packet, you'll see the 9 community partners listed. These were selected as organizations that the committee felt contributed to the whole of Richland County and had been long-term partners in providing essential services that met within some of our key impact areas. I will also note that in our current application, the way that funding is split, there is a 60-40% split, meaning that 60% of allocations are set for the community partners to apply for, and 40% are set for other outside nonprofits or organizations to apply for. And so making sure that all committee members understand that 60%, and you have currently 9 organizations. We all know, just based off previous funding requests, that even the 60% would not fund all these 9 organizations at the amount that they previously requested. So noting that adding any additional groups to that list would furthermore reduce that 60% funding. So making sure we're all aware and looking at the individuals, organizations in this list on the same page. Ms. Barron, you recognized?
And so, and I hear you loud and clear, Ms. Mackey. So I'm wondering if perhaps we could do as if we did last year we had several organizations, several nonprofits that had applied as a part of our general fund budget, and then they were moved over to our competitive grant side with the $16 million to be funded. And they did, if I'm speaking out of turn, please correct me. But I don't think they had to go through the competitive process, but those funds were already set aside based upon what they had requested. So could we not do something similar for those 4 organizations to say that, you know, if we have an application, or if we don't, they would submit an application through Zoom grants like everyone else, going through the same rigorous process that all the other applicants would be, but noting they're not in that category of the 60%, but they are in that 40% plus 400,000, and to note they would their funding would be there. And that's something that as a council we have done in the past, and so I'm wondering if perhaps we could do something similar to that.
I don't know if that was for who.
So
In general? Oh,
if you don't,
Okay, go right ahead. Mr. Brown.
I can answer one part of it
Oh,
because it's
okay.
specific to a budget motion.
Oh, okay.
So the budget motion did not anticipate that with the 400,000. So I would say that because that wasn't how it got to the committee as a part of the budget motion, that my understanding would that would not be possible based off the budget motion that sent the funding to the Community Impact Grants Committee.
Could I?
Yes, ma'am.
So as a follow-up, would it be possible, or since it was a part of the motion that came from the full body, could this body in return make another motion that would reflect what I'm stating to go to full council as a part of, I don't know if we can, it's making a motion on top of a motion, or from a motion.
I would have to say, because and I know it sounds very I guess technical, but again, that was the budget process, and it involved 3 readings and a public hearing, and so you're now potentially talking about a budget amendment because you're amending. You would be asking to amend the motion that came out of the budget process, which also again included 3 readings and a public hearing. And my understanding is that anytime you have a budget amendment, it also requires an additional 3 readings and a public hearing. So, and I don't think that's your intent, even though you're trying to figure out a way to address your motion. So that, again, I say that's a lot to say, but for anyone trying to follow that conversation, it would require an amendment to the budget because that all was a part of the budget process, and our budget process by law requires 3 readings and a public hearing, and the amendments follow the same protocol.
Oh, and because the wheels on the bus are going round and round right now. If these organizations are cleared as a part of the general fund, then they don't necessarily follow the guidelines of the $400,000. And that's extremely technical.
I would have to ask for, when you say they're clear for the general fund, can you tell me?
So we have general fund dollars, the 40 and the 60, right? That is general fund dollars. Now we as a council, brought $400,000 from ARPA funds into this pot of money. Now that we are clearly stating that staff, once they apply, will determine if they, if a project will have ARPA funds, they could have general fund budget, or they could have a combination of things depending on specific projects. So my question is, if we have one of those organizations that apply, and they apply and it's solely general fund dollars, could they not still qualify as a part of that process that I'm speaking of?
Yeah, so if a group qualifies for the 60-40 split, well, 60% has already been in these 9. So if they qualify for the 40%, then they qualify, and then you would just allocate up to $50,000 based off of what the committee's process is.
Okay.
Are you asking a different question?
No, I'm fine, and I'm gonna leave it here. I just, I feel obligated to ensure, back to what Mr. Pugh said, to make sure that the organizations that really should receive these funds, that we do I want to walk away from this desk today saying that I have put forth every thought in my head to ensure that they have an opportunity to be seated at the table. So I failed at that, but it's okay. But I feel comfortable in noting that I threw out several scenarios, and it wasn't to trip you, but just this is democracy. This is how we get things done. So I'm done. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other? Okay, sorry, Ms. English, you recognize?
Muddy the water. I'll apologize, but I think we're all on the same page, just wanting these organizations that have been working so hard with children to be able to continue their funding at least throughout this year. But is there a way, even if they're not noted as part of the 9 partners, that we can increase their funding?
I just want to ask one question, make sure I'm clear, because your statement was you want to make sure that these organizations can continue their work. And I guess I'm not understanding, where have we said that we wouldn't by them not
no.
applying, right? Like, just
Yeah.
every organization is applying. So I guess we haven't, in my mind, I haven't made any decision about not doing anything. So I guess I want to be clear when you say to
Correct.
make sure. Okay.
You're correct.
Okay.
I'm like Gretchen now.
Okay, I just want to make sure as we're talking that it's not being perceived by any nonprofits
Yeah.
that we have pre-selected
Yeah.
to
No,
fund
we haven't.
anybody, because
We haven't
this is the point of the
pre-selected anybody,
process
y'all.
is that
Yeah.
everybody's going to apply, and the groups that you're mentioning, as well as 12 others that aren't being mentioned, all have the opportunity to apply, and as a body, they all do important work with kids, and that they have the same opportunity as someone else to apply. And so I want to make sure that it doesn't come across that we're taking away anybody's opportunity. The point of this is to give everybody the same opportunity, because in the past, everybody has not started off on the same playing field. And so I just wanted to be clear, we're not taking away anybody's opportunity. We're giving everybody the same start right now. Okay. I'm sorry, Miss English.
No, you're fine.
Go ahead.
You're fine. I like your clarification on that. And I wanted to know, you know what? I don't want to muddy the waters. $50,000 is good. It's good. I'm like you. I don't want to run out of funds.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was it.
That was it.
Okay, well, y'all know we had a few other people here that might have been online that I need to acknowledge, but we have a motion for adjournment. We have a second. Madam
I
Clerk,
withdraw
could,
if you need me to. I'm just-
it's okay. Go ahead, could you call the roll, please? Thank you.
Barron,
Yes?
Mackey,
Yes,
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
thank you.